Welcome to the interview, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk here.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
No problem. No problem. Yeah, I mean, I would love to just jump right into the subject. Like, obviously, this is for kind of the language nerds of the world. And one of the things I thought was really interesting is how you've written, I mean, 9 books in English. And obviously you speak and understand English like very, very, very well. But I think that for a lot of people that this can be challenging as a non-native speaker and can be a little bit intimidating. So this is something I wanted to talk about. So I wondered if kind of to start us off, if you'd be able to like walk us through your process of writing, of how you start and end up and write a book in English as an Italian speaker. Maybe give us like 60 seconds or a couple minutes on just what your approach is to this.
Yeah, so basically, I think that I write it mostly like an English speaker would do, meaning that because my work is in English, my wife speaks English, we speak English all the time. Basically, nowadays I'm thinking in English. So
Mm-hmm.
all the notes I take, everything is in English. So I write it directly in English. And the thing that I do differently is that, for example, I use programs such as Grammarly to check the orthography and a couple of other programs. Uh, but for the rest, the process is like I guess most people do.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe something
Mm-hmm.
that I do differently from other people is that I never set myself with the idea of writing a book.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like once, because of my work or because of my research, I accumulate a body of, let's say, concepts that could become a book. At this point, I tell myself, okay, maybe I can write a book.
Hmm.
And yeah.
So the book topics kind of naturally form. And do you do a lot of do you have a lot of work outside of just books? Like, I mean, are you writing Substacks? Oh, sorry, I'm gonna mute
Yeah.
everybody who's coming on.
Well, I have so I have two newsletters.
Mm-hmm. Of
One which is the one on my website,
course, yeah.
lucas-dellanna.com, and then I have another one on Substack, which is just for people management related topic,
Mm-hmm.
which I use less. But then most of the writing happens in a way to Twitter. Um, and yeah, and then of course outside of that I have all my work as a consultant, which
Mm-hmm.
is where most of the ideas come from.
So you start writing and through your work and kind of like ideas start gelling in a form where you start thinking like, oh, this feels like this could be book material.
Yeah,
Something
so
like that.
most of what I write in the books are things that I first discuss with my consulting clients mostly.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you see that there are topics which keep coming over and over, maybe clients that keep asking the same questions, then you understand that maybe that's material that could go in a newsletter edition or in a book. And
Right.
once there are enough adjacent, let's say, topics, then I think like, okay, I can make a book out of that.
Gotcha. Okay. So it's really ground up. I mean, that's really interesting
Yes.
that it's sort of you start with the problem coming from your clients, and then that is obviously indicates like, oh, there's something here. Do you have an example of that from, one of your clients that led to, control heuristic or power of adaptation or anything like that? I'd be interested to hear kind of like a story.
Yeah, so for example, well, the two books that I wrote on management, the three books which I wrote on management, they're basically things that I've been talking for years and consulting on. So best practice for operational excellence, I've done a lot of work on that. And
Mm-hmm.
and then I basically just was like, okay, these are all the things that I do at work. Why don't I put them in a book? Like, but that was like the control heuristic instead, which is more about human behavior.
Mm-hmm.
This was more the reflection that okay, a big part of management is about getting people to do things. And
Mm-hmm.
what you realize is that very often the problem is not that they don't know what to do, is that they don't do it. But the thing is that sometimes it's because they don't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Other times, instead, they do want to do it, but they don't do it. A bit in the same way in which I want to exercise every day, maybe, but then I don't necessarily do it.
I was going to say
But
this kind of feels like a habit thing. So how do you break
exactly,
that? Not to spoil
exactly.
the book, but how do you deal
And
with
and the thing, the basic principle is that our brain doesn't take decisions at once. It has one single unit. It has one part of the brain, for example, the cortex, which is the part that thinks, that can think costs, benefit, and they can make reasoning such as, for example, if I exercise every day, I will get fitter. So I should do it. And
it?
then
Mm-hmm.
maybe the cortex commits. And so I take a commitment, maybe I buy the gym subscription, whatnot. But that's not the part of the brain that takes action. The part of the brain that decides whether I take action is another one. There are quite a few. I focus on one which is called the basal ganglia. And if that part doesn't think that the action is worth it, then I will not take it. And that leads to a lot of frustration because there is a part of my brain that wants me to exercise. There is another part of my brain that doesn't want. The result is that I don't do it. I don't know why. I feel frustrated and so on.
And correct me if I'm wrong,
And
but the basal ganglia, the way you're describing it, that's not looking at the logic of it. Your cortex is saying you want to get fit, you want to look sexy, you want to sleep better, whatever. So you should go to the gym every day. But the basal ganglia is sort of making more like subconscious. Is it kind of like subconscious decision making? Not
well, both
like.
both both can act subconsciously,
Mm-hmm,
but the difference is that the basal ganglia doesn't have access to imagination, to long-term thinking, to logic, only has
mm-hmm,
access to emotions. And therefore, the question task itself is, what emotions do I associate with working out, with exercising?
mm-hmm,
And if the emotions that I associate with exercising is, for example, it's tiring, I feel sweaty, I feel smelly, whatever, then I will not do it.
mm-hmm,
And if instead the emotions I associate with is I will feel good, um, and so on, then I will do it.
hmm,
And so much of it applies also, for example, with management, because maybe I'm also thinking about self-management. Like I want myself to, for example, make some sales call, and then I don't do them. And the reason is because I don't like calling people and disturbing them from their workflow.
mm-hmm.
And I feel uncomfortable, and so I don't do it. And yeah.
So is the solution here kind of like a Pavlovian associate good feelings with the things that you want to do, you know? Like
Yeah,
like for
that's
manage for
that's a
management, associate the money with the sales call or rewards or good, things like
yes,
that.
that's a possible thing, but the tricky thing is that you cannot associate it in the future, you need to associate it in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Let me explain. If you give a financial incentive, that only works sometimes, and usually it works with people who already got a financial incentive in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, if you have someone that already had some sales targets, and if they meet it, they already got some money, then financial incentives might work. If instead you have someone who never had a sales target, or maybe someone with the previous job, they had a target and maybe they reached it, but somehow the previous boss was like, I know, things change. Now the business is worse, cannot give you the bonus, then that financial incentive will not work. Because again, the question is, how do you feel about the financial incentive?
Mm-hmm.
Is it triggering the adrenaline rush in you, basically? Like, are you
Mm-hmm.
salivating? If the answer is yes, then it will work. If the answer is no, then it will not work.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So what kind of incentives do you write? I mean, I see this all over your Twitter account. Asking businesses to create the incentives for their employees, and a lot of times, like you speak a surprising amount about positivity, or like creating positive incentives versus negative incentives. What's and back to the control heuristic and back to kind of how you came up with the idea for that book, what were some of the examples you were seeing that led you to, develop this whole approach?
Well, the one thing, for example, is that the incentives have to be very specific. For example, let's say that you have a manager who is doing a good job, but his weakness is that he doesn't delegate, for
Mm-hmm.
example. If you put an incentive on him on his job, like if you get a positive job evaluation, you will get a big bonus. And you tell him, and the way to get the positive job evaluation is that you delegate more. What's likely to happen is that they don't see necessarily the incentive really linked to, like, the cortex knows that if they delegate more, they will get the incentive. But the
Mm-hmm.
basal ganglia instead still thinks like, I don't like delegating, I will not do it. There are other ways in which I can get my positive job evaluation. And maybe they will work longer hours, maybe they will even work harder, but they will not do the thing they don't like. So it has to be extremely, extremely, extremely specific. And the other thing is that, again, incentives in the future don't work. The best way that you can get someone to delegate is by giving him to delegate a small, small task, something which is small
Mm-hmm.
enough that they feel like they will do it, they do it, and then you catch them right. And you praise them, reward them, whatnot.
Start
And that
building
will
up
work.
those associations.
Exactly, because now you put it in the past. And there is the past emotional association, which was felt. They had the adrenaline rush and whatnot. And that works much better.
Yeah. All right, I got a question for you. So you mentioned that, you speak in Italian, you write in Italian, you do your or sorry, in English.
English.
English, yes, yes, yes. You write in English, do your notes in English, speak at home in English, talk to your dog in English. Dee Dee, who's great. Do you dream in English or Italian or both?
There is never dialogue in my dreams.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Huh. Um, well,
Yeah.
another thing I wanted to ask was kind of, so for the aspiring writers in the room, once you've come up, it's fascinating you're talking about how you come up with these topics, which is basically your clients are asking the same questions over and over and dealing with the same problems over and over. So now, once it's time to write, what's your process? Like, how do you, if you've decided this is the topic, you've maybe thrown it out in your newsletter a couple of times, gotten positive responses, and decided that this is book material. Do you dedicate an hour a day? Do you spend 3 weeks and lock yourself in a room? Like, what's your, how do you go about it?
So my process is usually that if I don't do the if on the days that I'm not doing client work, I
Mm-hmm.
basically wake up, go to a coffee shop, have breakfast there, and then take out a white sheet of paper, a pen, and I start like basically work on an outline of a concept,
Mm-hmm.
and I try to really understand what's going on there. What are the real processes that are driving this problem? Or
Mm-hmm.
what's an inconsistency that people see and but it's not clear why there is this inconsistency? What are things that maybe people have different opinions on? Like maybe
Mm-hmm.
you hear half of the people that think one thing, half of the people that think the other thing, and clearly they're both right from their point of view, but where does the disconnect come from? Like
Mm-hmm.
these kind of things, I try to answer these questions, and it really pays to do it in writing, because when you write, you cannot put inconsistent thoughts on the same sheet of paper. Whereas if you try to do it in your mind, the two inconsistent thoughts, they can very well coexist at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It also feels like that gets to the heart of the issue that you're trying to deal with. I mean, if
Yes.
50% of the people think one thing, 50% of people think the other thing, and they 100% of them think that they're right, that's an indicator that there's a problem or a bias or something that's making this a worthy topic to talk about, but also something that you need to find a solution for, and you need to really come up with a clear solution for.
Yeah. Yeah, and then this process can take anything from 1 week to a couple of months.
Mm-hmm.
And then usually at some point you have it somehow morphed into an outline for a book. And at this point, I open a Word document, I put the outline as chapters or headings, and then I just work on filling it in, basically.
Okay, so
And
you come up with a really strong outline,
yes,
and then write the pieces, you know, almost like mini
yes,
essays, something like that.
yes, correct.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay, so the outlining is the really big part of it.
exactly. Yeah.
Hmm, that's
And
interesting.
yeah, and can really take, I think that the shortest it took was 2 weeks for ergodicity, and the
Mm-hmm.
longest it took was probably 3 months. Yeah.
And is that end to end, or is that once you have the outline?
I'm talking about the outline.
Oh, okay. So for the outline
So
process,
you already
between
you already
two
take
weeks to 3 months.
yeah, so you already take a problem that have been somehow on some parts of it working it professionally for at least a few years.
Mm-hmm.
Then the outline takes weeks, months, and then the writing instead usually doesn't take that long. And then you have the editing and then the
Yeah.
publishing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like when you get to the writing part, you have a very you have a super clear idea of what it is that you want to say. So then it
Yes.
you can kind of go on autopilot a little bit. I mean, not
Yeah, that's the thing. Like if you don't have a very clear 100% idea the moment you start writing,
mm-hmm,
then one, you will feel like a lot of moments in which you don't know what to write,
mm-hmm,
and that looks like writer block, or you'd find yourself that you start checking your phone or doing other things. And two, you will write a lot of times chapters that then you end up deleting and you really waste a lot of time. Yeah.
yeah. Well, that answers one of my questions was going to be about writer's block, but it sounds like you've kind of answered it there, which is get your
Yeah.
outline really tight. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. I think that writer block is the idea that you haven't defined the problem clearly or the solution clearly. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you working any books right now?
Yes, now I'm working on a book which is called Reproducible Success Strategies.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you who by chance happen to be in Daniel Vassalzo's community, I've also done a talk on the same topic, but it's kind of different. Like some topics are the same, but a lot of it is different. And that's the one that the outline is taking the longest. And we are at
Really?
3 months at counting. Yeah.
Any particular reason? Is it difficult? Are you finding it difficult? Like, yeah, just what are you finding difficult about it, if I may ask?
Uh, I think that the most difficult part is to put the 5 to 10 core ideas into an outline that feels coherent. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, Sebastian, I saw you wanted to
Yeah.
jump in for a second.
I didn't know if I was allowed to interrupt or not. Hi, Luca.
Co-host.
I have a main question, but I just want to say firstly, I'm similar to you. I also dream with no dialogue. So maybe it's more common than we realize. I'd never thought about it up until right now. My question for you is, Wittgenstein famously said that the limits of a person's language are the limits of their world. And I wondered, you're writing your work, you deal with some abstract concepts and models that you create. And have you ever had a model or a theory or an idea where it made perfect sense in Italian? It's easy to express in Italian, but but, but you just could not express that in English because of the limitations of the language.
So the part about Italian, no, never, but because really I never think or talk about those things in Italian. Like paradoxically, like thankfully I never work with Italian clients almost. And if I do, we speak English. But if you ask me to talk about my work in Italian, I would have to stop and think about things. So, but that said, you brought a very important point, the one by Wittgenstein, which is that sometimes you need to give names to things and to problems. And that's not much to make it clearer to the reader. Maybe at the end you don't need to use that, but you need to use it for you, for internal thinking. Yes.
Awesome.
You know,
That's
actually,
really helpful. Thank you.
The word ergodicity is one that I did the Taleb Ruri class, and that was a big topic, ergodicity. And it was a concept that I had, never thought about, and then once understood what it was, saw it everywhere,
Yeah. Yeah, and for example, that's a good example, because in my book, I don't use the term or define the term until already 40% in. And I think that this was the trick, because it's so difficult to explain what's ergodicity if you try to explain the property. And instead I start with example and I talk about the phenomenon, and that's much easier. And after you understand what the phenomenon is, and I gave you a few examples, at this point I can start defining the property. But if you try to do it before, you will lose the reader for sure, unless there are some super statistician, mathematician, and so on.
That's an interesting approach too, because you label the book ergodicity and then don't mention it, don't actually define the term until about halfway through.
Yes.
And so it's almost a little bit of a teaser,
Yes, but I don't do it for teasing. I do it because otherwise you will lose the, like, you cannot give a simple definition of ergodicity in one sentence that people can understand before they understood the concept. It's,
Yeah, but if you use something like the 100 all-in bets in 100 days, or some of those examples, it's pretty clear to almost everybody. It is kind of like a seemingly complicated topic that really, I mean, I just found myself, there was a couple of examples that I heard that immediately clarified what it was. Could you give a quick example of ergodicity for people who may not have read the book or taken that class?
Yeah, so the example I'm making in the book is take a skier, and he has a very good skier. He has a 20% chance of winning a race, but he also takes a lot of risks, and he has a 20% chance of breaking his leg in each race. And then I ask the question, how many races he's expected to win in a championship consisting of 10 races? And most people would answer 2 races, because they think he wins 20%, there are 10 races, and 10 times 20% makes 2 races. But it's wrong. And the correct answer is 0.71. And the reason is because if he breaks his leg in the first race, he cannot participate to the following ones. And so he has only like a very low chance of participating to the 10th race. And so he wins many less races. And if you crunch the number, it's 0.71. So where does this difference come from? You expect 2 and you get 0.71. It's because of irreversibility. If you only consider 1 race, the consequence of breaking the leg is that you lose that race. If you consider more than 1 race, the consequence of breaking your leg is irreversible, and you lose not only that race, but all future races. And so I say irreversibility absorbs future gains. And basically, when you have irreversibility, you have this phenomenon, and we call that context, we call it a non-ergodic context. And back to what you said, that sometimes having a word helps thinking correctly. Sometimes you also have the opposite.
Yeah.
That having a word misleads you. And for example, the control heuristic was all about the idea that the brain takes decisions at once is wrong. If you think a person took a decision, you will have a wrong model of behavior. If you think a brain took a decision, wrong model of behavior. Instead, it's parts of the brain. Every time you think someone took a decision, you need to specify which part of their brain did it. Is it the cortex or the basal ganglia? And if you do that, suddenly so many more behaviors will take place. It's a bit like with companies. We always say things such as, I don't know, Facebook decided to acquire Instagram. But companies, Facebook cannot take decisions. It's someone inside Facebook which took a decision. And once you start asking yourself, who take the decision? Because sometimes it's the CEO, sometimes it's the lawyers, sometimes it's the shareholder, sometimes it's the designer, sometimes it's the marketers. You will start to understand a lot more. And so this is just an example of something that's misleading. When you have an entity composed of multiple parts, and you think about just the entity taking decisions instead of asking yourself which part took the decision.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, and it's a lot to think about regarding our own decision making. So, okay, so I wanted to ask another question, a little bit straying away from the topic of your books, but how do you distribute? What's your distribution method to actually, get them in front of people's eyes?
Well, I am the bad person to ask this because I don't really have a method. So basically what I've been doing is that I publish books, I write things on Twitter. When I publish a book, I write it on Twitter, on my mailing list, and then people read the book, they invite me on podcasts or conferences. I go there, I speak, hopefully more people read about it, but it's all very organic and not so deliberate, but it's not a conscious choice. It's just that I don't like selling, I don't like marketing. And because of that, I know that I should do more. I know that it would be beneficial for me to do more, but plenty of times I have two tasks. I have a marketing or selling task on my to-do list, and then instead I prefer making some research or writing the next book or
The basal ganglia is not getting motivated enough to actually do the selling and marketing, huh?
That's the thing. And so on this there are probably better authors that you can talk about. That said, I think that what I'm doing, which is good, and this is something that you can that some people might want to copy, is that basically when I'm talking about the book or writing about the book or the ideas on Twitter and etc., I try always to write them as simple as possible, but never oversimplifying or making them dumber. And the result is that maybe when I write on Twitter on the newsletter, maybe I appeal a bit less to the average reader, but I appeal a bit more to the person who has a podcast or to the person who has a conference. And that really helped me getting on podcasts and conferences. Even if I'm nobody, I don't go to networking events, I don't do any outreach whatsoever, and so on.
But then a question for you is, are your books a means unto themselves, or are they, kind of a method? Are they sort of a marketing tool for your consulting business?
They did happen to be a marketing tool for my business, but it's not how I write them, why I write them and how I write them.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I think that that's an important part, like trying not to write for, like, paradoxically, if you put yourself like, if what you like doing and how you position yourself is to be a deep expert on certain topics, then I think that it's beneficial to write the book to pass that expertise rather than to market yourself.
Well, it's an authenticity thing, I would imagine. If you write a book just for the sake of marketing yourself, paradoxically, it comes across as inauthentic,
Yeah. I think Jeffrey had a question. Seeing the raised hand.
All right, Jeffrey, let's hear it.
Thank you very much. Buonasera, Luca. I think it's been 2 years. Maybe you don't remember me. The first time we talked, I was so stressed, but I could remember this meeting organized by Jack and Sebastian. So here's my question. Have you built your community since the beginning? The reason why I'm asking this is because you said that you didn't care much about marketing, and marketing is important when you want to sell. And I've bought some of your one of your book. I think it was about autism with the magnifying glass. Okay, this one. But you have to kind of promote your book. So I think that you've built a community first to sell your books. And I wanted to know how, since you just said that you were interested into marketing.
Yeah, so the thing on this is that I really don't, so personally, I really don't like big groups and communities. Like I love talking to people, but one-on-one, 2-on-2, small groups. I really don't like big groups. I don't like things such as I like these Discord communities or this kind of things. I don't, but it's just my personal inclination. Like I'm like this also with my friends. I often meet them, but we always meet in small groups. And if there is a big group, I prefer like going to that. That's just my personality. And so
So you like the bar
let's
more than the
say,
club.
yeah, sorry.
You like the bar more than the club.
Yes, I like the coffee shop more than the club. Yes, and the thing is, I've optimized my marketing and my book mostly for myself. I'm not saying self-enjoyment, but like to do my work in a way that I really like. And of course it comes with some trade-offs. If I optimize different parts, I will definitely do different things. I'm not sure necessarily that I would still do communities because I really don't like communities. I would maybe do more like community events. So things such as, I don't know, like I'm not following the community, but we have a Zoom meeting every month, something like that. Actually, that's a good idea. Actually, maybe I should start doing that. That's probably a good idea because that I like, because it's kind of like self-contained and so on. But definitely, yeah.
How long have you been writing books, by the way?
So first book got published in 2017, so it's 6 years.
Okay, so it means that you've kind of organically grown, let's say not a community, but a fan base.
Yes.
On 6 years. So okay, that's kind of answered the question. This is yeah, okay, cool. I'm gonna pass on to Jan because he raised the hand. Thank you for answering my question, by the way.
Well, I just want to
No,
jump
thank you
in
for
that
asking.
Thank
9
you.
books in 6 years is impressive, my friend. That is something. That's pretty amazing.
That tells you really how much I don't like selling, and I would prefer writing books. Yeah.
All right, Giancarlo, have you have a
Giancarlo?
question?
Yes. Hi, Luca. It's good to see you here. Actually, I got a couple of questions. First, have you ever considered writing a novel, fictional characters, stories, in order to? I was wondering whether this could help to reach out to a broader audience, for your topics and subjects. And the second question is, how much you weigh the style of your writing, and if you did you ever experience in falling into the trap of looking for really very impressive choice phrases or style, and do you think this could enhance and to some extent the ability to convey the concept or the story you want to tell. And yeah, that's my two questions.
Thank you,
I'm curious about the
Giancarlo.
fiction. Curious about the fiction one too.
Yeah, so about the fiction, I thought about it, like not like full novel, but more like if you're familiar with the concept of business fable, like Patrick
Mhm.
Lencioni, kind of style. I thought about it, started writing a couple of chapters, then wasn't fully satisfied, but maybe something like that will come out in the future. Yes. And then on the second question about style, what I try to do is to be as clear, precise, and concise as possible. That's what that's what I try to optimize for in terms of style. So I try to use the simplest word I can use for some concept. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to optimize for clarity and precision. Yeah.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you so much, Luca.
Well, I think that's. I mean, that's my favorite writers are universally pretty simple writers, or who at least embrace simple language. A question: do you read a lot of fiction?
I used to. I used to. I haven't
Mhm.
in the last few years.
Hmm.
Yeah. Now I think that I don't read much actually. I mean,
Mhm.
I do read a lot on Twitter. I do read blogs, newsletters, books. I tend to read much less than people might think.
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting. Who are, for how about nonfiction? Who are some of your favorite authors?
Oh, it's basically going to be things such as Agatha Christie and all the likes. So I
Oh,
really like that.
what about oh, I was gonna ask for nonfiction, but for either
Sorry, I
or is
thought you
fine.
asked for fiction. Okay, for non-fiction, well, it's Taleb, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And then other than Taleb, I don't know if I really Patrick Lencioni, I like very much. And then other than those two, I don't know if I really have someone that I would say like I like the author rather than I like the book.
Mm-hmm.
If it makes sense. Like there are
Mm-hmm.
plenty of books I like, but I wouldn't say that necessarily like, or maybe they just wrote a single book, and so it's hard to say what it is that you like. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple of fiction authors who I'll read pretty much every book they put out, but I think I only have one or no, maybe two or three nonfiction authors. Talib included, but it's a much
Yeah.
shorter list where nonfiction tends to be a little more
Yeah. Yeah. Now I'm
maybe.
checking. Yeah. I'm checking just the list of books I've read to see if there is any common name, but uh, no, Taleb and Lencioni are really the only one. I've also read a couple of by Seth Godin. Yeah.
Mm, yeah, he's pretty good. Now question is, and sorry, Jeffrey, I see you raising your hand. Just let me get one question real quick, and then I'll switch over to you. Is how do you decide when to throw an idea away? I assume that you go through quite a, again, through your newsletter, through your consulting gigs, you have a lot of probably hundreds of potential book ideas that are passing through your brain in any given year. How do you decide which ones to throw away, and what's that point, when you've maybe sunk cost into writing an outline or something like that, and how do you decide if it's not working?
Well, so first of all, like one thing is if something you discover that is wrong, it's immediately thrown away. And if not, it's never really thrown away. Like I keep all drafts, all
Mhm.
ideas. I check them every now and then because maybe it didn't make sense then, but now, or maybe then I didn't think about the right way of presenting it, and now maybe later it comes. Usually what it's not usually when I start writing a book, it goes to the end, because the reason why I start writing a book is because there was a topic that kept recurring in conversation. So it kind of already, like, if I'm writing a book, it's already because I know that that topic came into, and so maybe it won't be a success, but it was worth writing. Yeah, but that's because I don't start with the idea like I'm gonna write a book. What should I write it for? But it's the other way around. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, pulling them organically from your consulting gigs really is that is a strong strategy.
Yeah, and so, and more importantly, it kind of like almost guarantees that what I'm writing about is correct and works. Because if you do it the other way around, it's a guess, basically. And then instead, if he thinks that I've tried clients on, worked, and so on, then you're much more likely to know, like, okay, this is a real book. It's not just talking about guesses of the author. Those are things that actually, yeah.
Yeah, in a product sense, you know, the tech people talk about this all the time, but you have to solve real problems. And so if your book is coming from being asked over and over and over, you know, about this topic, how to solve this issue, you know, you got a real problem.
Yeah.
All right, Jeffrey, go ahead, my friend.
He's here.
Didi. Hey, Didi.
Hello, friend. Luca, I was late for your meeting, so I'm sorry if in advance the question was asked already. But speaking of writing nonfiction, because I'm writing fiction. I mean fiction in French, within my tongue language. And have you ever thought about writing Italian books, or have you done so already? I'm not sure, because you're writing English books, and this is an achievement for non-English speakers, if I may say. And I feel that writing books in our mother tongue is easier. Maybe you don't think so. So have you ever thought about it, or have you ever written books in Italian?
So no, I never did. I just published a book in French 2 weeks ago. Like the translation of my book Ergodicity, I just translated to French and just got published like 10 days
By
ago.
yourself?
Yes. So I am half French. Half of my family is French, so I speak French currently. Writing mostly correct. My mother proofread it, so hopefully she got some mistakes. But yeah,
it's amazing.
We will see how it goes. How the sales of that translation go will inform whether I will translate more or less, or less so. Basically, the reason why I'm writing in English is also because it's the biggest market. One, and two, because of the kind of topics that I write about. Usually the person that's interested in also knows English. If I were to write fiction, for example, that would be a much bigger argument towards translating more. But I kind of expect, for example, everyone who is interested in ergodicity, probably they also read papers in English. They have some kind of maybe of background, not because the background is necessary, but just because the kind of people who are interested in, I expect them to. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that even though I live in Italy, I know much more people abroad. I mean, I have a lot of friends here, but they're not the kind of person who are interested in my books.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's one thing. Also clients, for example, I almost don't have any Italian clients, and the very few that I do, they all speak English. The corporation, mostly they're not Italian corporation, they speak English currently, and so it's kind of like, what's the point? And Italian is also such a big market compared to French and Spanish, because French and Spanish, they have other countries. You have people that study Spanish and French. Italian, who knows Italian? Only Italians. So I'm not sure that it's a very good use of my time until maybe later on. Like if I reach a point in which my audience is that big, maybe it will make sense. But at that point, probably it will not be me translating. Maybe I will have an editor, a publisher, and whatnot. Yeah.
Okay, so do you suggest that I buy l'ergodicité, comment les résultats irréversibles affectent les performances à long terme dans le travail, l'entreprise, les investissements, les relations et le sport?
Yes, of course.
Okay, I'm gonna buy it then. Thank you.
I think that Ergodicity is my best book. Yes. So,
okay. I'm gonna buy it in French, by the
right.
way. Okay.
There you go.
Perfect. And if you notice something that neither me nor my mother something that we missed, please let me know. Send me an email. Or...
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
You don't work with a publisher, right? You just self-publish everything?
Yes.
How do you do the physical copies, the paperback and
it's all done with Amazon.
Okay, just through their KDP service.
Yeah, Amazon is fantastic for that. They take care of shipping, printing, quality is excellent nowadays. It wasn't so good 5-6 years ago. Now it's excellent quality. Only problem is the royalties, which are very low, especially for Kindle. So you might not know it, but Amazon takes more of a cut for Kindle that doesn't cost them anything to distribute, basically, because it's software, than to print and ship a paperback. And the same Kindle that you can buy on Amazon, you can buy it from Gumroad, from my website. And if you do buy on my website, I get 95, 96, 97%. No, now it's more closer to 90%, but I get that much. If you buy it on Kindle, I get about 35%. So please don't buy it from Amazon unless you really need to. Thank you. René asked if it's available in Spanish. Not yet, René. I will see how the French sales goes, and if the sales go well, I will translate in Spanish, and if not, maybe not. Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting, distribution is if you can open up your older books to new languages, in new markets, that's, kind of like put a whole new life into them with a whole new audience. That'd be pretty interesting.
Yeah. We'll see how it goes. Seth?
Hey, Luca, just piggybacking off of what Jack was saying. So obviously when most people are starting out, they will self-publish out of necessity. Very, very hard for an unknown author to get published. Would you, or have you been approached, or would you consider going with a publisher and changing from self-published? Now you have more of an audience, now you're getting more of a following, or are you dead set on self-publishing? Are there factors that will mean you always stay with self-publishing?
So that's an excellent question. So right now, I have been contacted by a few relatively famous authors that suggested me to talk with their own publisher. The thing that there are two things that keep me still on my toes. Three things. So one is that working with a publisher is a lot of work. It adds probably 18 to 24 months to the book timeline. It's a lot of work. They might edit a lot of things. For sure, they will edit my style of writing a lot. So that's one consideration. Second consideration is one thing which I really like about selling books on Gumroad is that I get your email. And then the moment after you buy a book, I send you an email like, do you want to be part of my newsletter? I only send one email because I need first to ask authorization, but I do get to say that. And because of that, sometimes people go to my newsletter, which is great because maybe they will buy more books. But more importantly, someone talks to me afterwards. And a lot of consulting clients, they reply to the email that I've sent them after they bought it on Gumroad. So if I didn't have the consulting job, probably I would already have had a publisher. Now that keeps me a little bit on my toes. Third thing is the royalties. If you are with a publisher, you get 2-3 euros per book. If I sell on Gumroad now, I get 19 euros per book, kind of, slightly less, slightly more. But question is, my books right now, they're kind of niche. I'm not saying that I will not make books for the larger audience later, and in some way, maybe I will in 1-2 years. But the books right now, they're kind of niche. So I'm not sure exactly. One, that if I get the publisher, I will get all the benefits that come with it.
Mhm.
Because you think, oh, you get a publisher, the publisher will promote the book for you. No. Publishers only promote a small fraction of the books that they publish, and it's quite unlikely that that I get that. Biggest thing, like one of the main reasons why you might want to have a publisher is if you want to have the stamp of approval, kind of.
Mhm.
I kind of, like, for a lot of things, got that stamp of approval also from other things, from conferences, from famous people that wrote reviews of my books. If you check my Twitter from who follows me, like a lot of other things. And so again, I'm not sure like exactly how it balances out. That said, I know that I have definitely bias to do things independently myself. So
Mhm.
most probably, despite everything that I'm telling you, probably for most people, going with a publisher is still better. That's one of my things on my to-do list for 2024. Approach a publisher with an idea for a concept that I've already worked on, I've already talked a lot, but to put it in a way that is really like more appealing to a larger audience. And yeah, we'll see how it goes.
I have a friend who's a pretty not famous, but he's a writer. He's one of the New York Times journalists, and he wrote a book that ended up on Obama's year-end list of his favorite books, or his reading list, or whatever you call it. And even with that that stamp of approval, he still didn't clear his advance. They gave him some advance. He said it was something like, I think he described it as maybe like 3/4 of a year's salary or something. So not terrible, but nothing. We're not talking about millions of dollars here or anything like that. And
I think that people overestimate like how many sales do things like this bring you.
Yeah.
Like, can you, like, for example, one thing is like I've been on an episode of I've been on Econ Talk twice.
On what?
Econ Talk.
Oh, okay.
It's pretty famous podcast, like very huge, and that was very good for me. And people contacted me out of it and got me some good consulting work. But if you check about the book sales, I got more book sales than once when Daniel Vassallo retweeted me. Because those were people that like maybe already know me.
Yeah.
Or kind of, or maybe they really trusted Daniel because they had personal interactions with. So to say, just it's very much like not as clear as like some people say, like, oh, you get published, then you're good. Not really. The distribution varies really a lot.
Yeah, well, I've heard, that publisher distribution is they kind of have like the venture capital model where they're expecting, 2% of their books to make 99% of their profits for the year.
Yeah.
So
and for example, if you take an example of one of the biggest books bestsellers of a few years ago was Atomic Habits by James Clear. He also had a monstrous email list before that. I don't remember like how many, but in the hundreds of thousands of people. And if I were to bet, that's what got the publisher also to promote him.
Yeah.
It was like, that guy already has a following, so that book's going to be a bestseller. It's not the other way around. So a lot of times you think, oh, the publisher will find me the people. paradoxically, he will find you the people if you already have the people.
Yeah.
So it's then, of course, like, I'm not an expert. Some of the things I might say here are wrong, but that's my impression.
I've heard the same thing about social media following, that, the publishers, they have a formula for, if you have 3 million Instagram followers, they expect a conversion of, X percentage, and that's going to be, that's baked into it. So,
Yeah.
having the existing following, as you said, paradoxically, that's what gets you the book deal, as opposed to the book dealing being what actually gets you the sales.
Exactly.
And Sebastian, I know you got to go. Thank you so much for helping co-host, my friend.
No, I've barely done anything. Thank you, Jack, and thank you, Luca. It's been fantastic chatting again. And yeah, I'll see you on Twitter.
Thank you. Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, take care.
Bye, guys.
Yeah, we got time for a couple more questions. You want to do maybe 2 or 3 more questions?
Oh,
And
I
call
have
it?
time. No worries.
All right. Jeffrey, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So Luca, before writing a book, you wanted to say something to other people, right? So maybe you started a blog or something, maybe you tweeted about your ideas. But how have you got the idea to start an actual mailing list? The reason why I'm asking this is because mailing lists are powerful to build what you called a niche, because you just said you compared yourself to someone else by selling books, because a niche is maybe compared to the whole planet is a small group, but it's still efficient to sell books. So how did you come up with the idea to build a mailing list, like writing emails on what period? I mean, how often were you writing emails then? And how did you come up with the idea to sell books, like promoting them on your emails, maybe? Like, how did it come? The reason why I'm asking this is because, as I've said, I tried to sell my own book. Okay, I'm gonna show up just for a couple of seconds. It's you've seen this. It's a proof, from Amazon. And like you, I'm not a seller, I'm not a marketer, and I don't have any community. So how did you grow your one? Like, did it grow with Twitter? Did it grow with your mailing list? Just tell us about it, please.
Yeah, so first of all, I think like you should have a mailing list even if you don't have any idea. So even if it's just a form and you're collecting and never write an email, you should have a mailing list. Just
Okay.
because maybe in 5 years you get a reason why you all want to use it. And if you started 5 years ago to collecting emails, you will just be better off. So this is the first thing. Second thing, I don't remember exactly how I was using the mailing list at the very beginning. I think that really the idea was just, well, if you bought my book or you follow me on Twitter, maybe you go on my website. And if you go on my website, it's because you want to hear from me or know when I publish the next book or something like that. So I'm just gonna put the email list there, even if I'm not writing, because the next time I publish the book, I just send you. So I think it started like that. And I think that at the very beginning, I was just sending emails like, oh, here I published the book, or oh, here they interviewed me on this podcast. Something like that. Then at some point around 2019, if I remember correctly, I think that I decided to start a more proactive approach. The tricky thing is that I really don't like when people write an email, for example, every week or every day. And that's more frequent than the frequencies in which they produce good thoughts. Because if they only have 2 good thoughts a month and they
Mhm.
publish every week, it means that half of the email will be bad.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a problem because every time that you send a bad email, you're basically teaching your audience not to open your email.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's completely to avoid. And so for me, the right frequency is lower than the amount at which you write or at which you produce content or anything that, so that you only sell good things. And if you somehow have a schedule that in which you produce content regularly, then you can set regular emails. If not, just send an email when you have something to write, but never
Mhm.
send an email for the sake of sending it. You're gonna destroy the good work and goodwill that you did. So that's one thing. And at that point in 2019, I thought I spend a lot of time on Twitter. And so what I will do is just that every time I see a good tweet, a tweet that makes me think, I just bookmark it. And then every week I take the top 5 tweets and I post it and I comment them. And they were very heavily commented, like non-banal things. Like there is another guy which I read his newsletter. I think he's called Shan Puri or something like that. And
Mhm.
his newsletter is once a week. He sends you the 5 tweets, the top 5 tweets.
Hmm.
And he doesn't comment them. I mean, he comments them, but he comments them with the laugh emoji or, yeah, that was incredible. They're not really comments. Like they're more
Mhm.
like emotional reaction, not comments. Instead, I was really commenting them. Like mini essays, 2-3 paragraphs, giving something new to the audience. And it was called the Thoughts of the Week. And I've been doing that regularly every week for 1 year or so.
Mm-hmm.
And that coincided with the year of the pandemic, of the lockdowns, and that was very good because mostly I wasn't doing any client work in person, of course. And so I could keep the schedule. It was something like every Tuesday in the morning, what I would do is that instead of working on something else, I will check my list of tweets from my list of likes from Twitter. I will take the 5 most interesting ones, put them there. Then at some point I started doing more courses, consulting. So the schedule got a bit more, and so I discovered that I wasn't being able to keep up with the thing, with what was required to do high quality things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I scratched it off and I started doing it every week, but every week, like without a fixed structure. Like sometimes it would be like 2 tweets. Sometimes it would be a mini essay. Sometimes it would be, oh, last week I went on this podcast and something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then recently, now I don't have any fixed structure. And now I only write one every 2 to 4 weeks. And it's kind of a digest of, maybe there is one small essay, maybe there are 2 or 3 links to podcasts I've been, books I've published, whatever. And then maybe there is like a small section in which I'm selling something, for example, a course.
Mm-hmm.
But it's never like, it's almost never an email for the course. Because if you are not interested on that, then I'm teaching you not to open my emails, basically.
It's the control heuristic thing again.
Yeah. Yeah. Then, of course, there are exceptions because, for example, if in the past you signed up for a waiting list for one of my courses, and then at the end you couldn't make it, then maybe to you, I will send an email just for the new edition of the course.
Mm-hmm.
Or for example, if you bought my book on management, maybe to you, if I have a new course on management, I will send you a one email just for the course. But to the big mailing list, I'm trying to send as little as possible and to make it as worth as opening as possible. Yeah.
Now, in terms of podcast, is that a push or pull thing? Do you try and get onto podcasts, or do podcasts
Never.
tend to approach? Okay, so they approach you.
No. So I never do any outreach whatsoever. The only thing that I do sometimes is if either I know that someone is coming that I already follow is coming to Turin or to Milan, and then maybe I send a message like, let's meet, and that is not happening anymore. But before the pandemic, if I go somewhere, and I know that there is someone, I will email them, would you want to meet for a coffee? For example, when I went to London in 2019, I emailed Mark Baker, Guven Aerobic on Twitter, I emailed Rory Sutherland, and Seb, I didn't know you yet at the time. And, but yeah, but I really do very, very little outreach, and almost everywhere, almost all podcasts have been is people read my books and then decide to call me.
We got a question from Renee in the chat. He said, I was wondering if you have opinions on other social networks like Facebook or broadcast channels on Instagram.
Yes, so for me, each network has a mechanic on its own. And depending on what you do, it might fit or not fit you. So for example, let me make an example. If you're selling things that have to do with fitness, or for example, Instagram is a great platform because you can put a 15 seconds video of you exercising, a picture of you being fit, whatnot. That will probably do well. If you try to do the same thing on Twitter, you would probably have to adapt and go a bit more on the technical advice side and so on. So this is one thing, is what kind of content goes well on which platform, and are you naturally producing that kind of content? I think that's one thing. Another thing is, what's your style? Like, if your preferred method of communication is writing, you will do better on Twitter than TikTok. If your preferred way to communication instead is talking, you will do better on TikTok than on Twitter. So this is another communication. Another consideration. Another thing is, what is the social network that you're using? Because you will already do better there. Because you will be more time there, you will have a better pulse of the network, you will know more people, you will see the replies better, you will be more likely to reply. So that's another consideration.
Twitter, this is a famous thing on Twitter of celebrities or people who are like Instagram famous or TikTok famous coming to Twitter and just completely bombing because they don't understand the dynamics and the like how to be successful on the platform, because it's a lot different.
Exactly. So that's the thing to consider. Then another thing to consider is whether you already have an audience or not. Because Instagram rewards people who already have an audience. Twitter is much easier to get through if you don't have an audience. Why? Because when you don't have an audience, posting will not do anything almost. Because no one, even if you write the best thing or post the greatest picture on Instagram, no one will see it because no one follows you. And at the very beginning, if you don't have followers, it's the replies that matter. You reply to someone, you write something smart, and then people like that, retweet that, or they see you to that, and they follow you. Now, the thing is that on Twitter, you're much more likely to read the replies and to retweet the replies than on Instagram, for example. Instagram, you cannot even retweet the replies. And therefore, Instagram is harder to get a following if you don't have already a following. Another consideration, for example, is whether you're doing things that are local. Instagram is better for things that are local because they have these geolocation things, because your friends are more likely to follow you on Instagram. Like, if I have 200 friends from high school, for example, and I tell all of them, follow me on Instagram and follow me on Twitter, I will get many more people following me on Instagram, for example. At least as in Europe, where Twitter is not very used very much. So that's another thing to consider. TikTok, I don't use it, but I heard that instead it's great if you don't know anyone, because I heard something along the lines of the first video that you post will automatically get seen by 100 people by default. And then how those people react will determine whether it will go up or down in the algorithm and so on. But so, for example, Twitter has this feature. So these are all considerations that you need to make. So there isn't really the best network. The question is which network you fit best. And then the last consideration is if you are selling something, is where you're selling it to. Because, for example, one thing is that ultimately what I'm selling is consulting services. And Twitter is the only social network in which actually the CEO of the company is actually there present. On Instagram is going to be either they have an anonymous account or it's their social media manager or something like that. And you cannot have a connection with them. There is no chance that they see what you're doing, basically. So, for example, for me, the only one that makes real sense is Twitter. LinkedIn is a bit different, depends on what you're doing. There is some kind of adverse selection in there, I guess, and a lot of other things. LinkedIn is something I didn't figure out totally. I know some people that got excellent results. Somehow for me, Twitter works much better. I guess that goes also like in the format of what we're sharing, how we're sharing it. Yeah.
To me, it seems like LinkedIn has a bit of an authenticity problem, but that might just be, because I don't know how to use very well.
No.
That's interesting. What about Facebook? Do you ever dabble with Facebook?
Facebook, I almost don't use it, meaning that I open it once or twice a week, but I only follow like basically high school friends, university friends, and the such. And it's basically just for 2 minutes, just checking up if there is anything like major. I almost never post there. I don't use it basically.
Yeah. I actually had my Facebook account closed down because I hadn't logged in long enough. Gone 5 years without logging in or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, any final questions for the great Luca DellAnna? Yeah, Jeffrey. Were you raising your hand because you had a question, or were you just waving?
No, I just want to say I'm fine. Thank you for the questions, or maybe just one, but I don't know if it's accurate. You've got the right not to answer this, Luca. When you're selling books is the thing. I've got a publishing house because I want to sell my own books. I've done a whole company for doing so. So I wanted to ask how much you were earning, but maybe you don't want to answer that, or maybe I should ask, are you able to live from your book selling without working aside?
So basically I make a small salary.
Okay.
That would probably not be enough. So I'm glad that I have my consulting job that occupies a big half of my time. And on the other hand, you should also, on the other hand, the fact that I don't really need, like that I'm doing something else also is a part of the reason why I don't promote the book so hard. Like if that were my thing, probably I would do much more to promote my books. And
I get it.
So that goes into the equation as well.
Yeah.
Goes into the equation as well. Another thing, for example, is like this goes into a lot of things. For example, my book Managing Remote Teams, you will find that it's only on Gumroad and only at 50 euros per book. The reason is because it's positioned to attract corporate clients. Because basically the idea is I don't really make money from the book selling it, I make money from the consulting that comes later. And so there is a lot of considerations, such as if I price it too low, it decreases the value. I sell it only on Gumroad because I want to have the email of the person who buys it so that I can send them the first email. So what I'm saying is that I'm not a full-time author, and because of this, I'm lot of the things I'm doing might not be optimal for someone that wants to be a full-time author, or that, for example, doesn't use the books also as a channel for something else.
Mm-hmm.
If it makes sense.
Oh, totally makes sense. Yeah. But it's, one of the questions is, if you went full time as the author, would your sales increase by 500% or 50% or 5%? Like it's, you don't really, it's sort of an unknown, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you don't know. I think that at the time I would write probably more like less niche books in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, it's very hard to say.
Do you have a sales, like a tail from your books, where you find that older books keep selling?
Oh,
Or
yes, totally.
Yeah.
So of course you get a bump at launch, and then
Mhm.
you get a bump every time that a smaller bump every time that I don't know, someone famous retweets it, or I go on a big podcast or something like that. But
Mhm.
other than that, sales are relatively constant. So I'll give you an idea. The book that on an average, so if you take up the bumps and you only
Mhm.
see the levels, the book that is selling the most is Best Practices for Operational Excellence, which was published in 2019, I believe.
Mhm.
And it was like my third book, I think. So it was one of the earliest. Like Ergodicity keeps selling really a lot. Yeah, so the thing is that also that's also the thing, because I'm not writing the book to make the instant success, let's say, they
Mhm.
tend to be much more resistant over time.
It's very
It
Telebian.
works.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. One last question for you, Luca, if I
Yes.
may. Speaking of the community mailing lists, for example, I'm really interested in programming, writing books, math, entrepreneurship, it's different topics. And I do want to talk about them, but I know that I can't just attract people who are interested in the same topics at once. Do you suggest that I'm just building one mailing list to talk to them, or several ones?
It depends what you are building the email list for. So
Remote work, as you said, for example, you want to comment a few tweets, or you want to talk about one specific topic at some time
no,
out of the blue, because you're just
no,
like you've got inspiration,
yeah,
and you want to talk to your audience.
yeah,
But some guy in your audience is just interested in writing books.
of course,
Other one, for example, Jack, is interested in programming.
yeah,
So he doesn't want to hear about, just for the sake of the example, he doesn't want to hear about publishing fiction,
Mhm.
yeah.
So do you suggest I segment my audience, or I just put all of them into one basket,
Yeah. Yeah, so what people will tell you probably that the optimal best thing to do is you segment them. So what happens is that based on where they sign up, maybe you have different pages on the website, and from the place where they sign up, you kind of know what interests them in the first place. Then during the welcome email, you ask them what are their interests. You ask them to click. You have a list of interests, they click, or with ConvertKit, for example, you can get them to a page where they can toggle on and off the interests. And then in your email, for example, if you use ConvertKit, I use ConvertKit. When they click on a link, you can tag people. So for example, you can tag them with interests and so on. And then when you write the mailing list, you can do things, basic things such as this email is focused on this topic and I only send it to the people interested. Or you can do advanced things, such as in the email with ConvertKit, for example, you can add blocks and you can say this block, you only show it to people who has been tagged with this interest. So technically you can do that. It's an enormous and absurd amount of work. And then you will missegment people.
Mm-hmm.
And the result is that if you don't have the scale that it makes it worth putting the amount of effort and maybe even hiring someone that does it for you, it will not work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So if you really are like super determined, you know that you have the scale and so on, it makes sense doing it. If not, I tried it. Okay, maybe I did it wrong or whatnot, or maybe I'm not good, but usually I'm not bad with these kind of digital things, and it's just too much work. So what I'm doing right now is that I wait until in an email I have enough thing to interest everyone. And then I write the email, and at the beginning of the email I write, today we will talk about A, B, and C. And then there is the headline A, and then the thing, the headline B, the thing, and then I just trust that people open the email, they see what interests them, they skim to it, and they close the email, but they found something that interested them, and therefore they will keep opening the next email. And this is basically what I'm doing right now. It's not
That
the
makes
optimal
sense.
thing, but that's what works for me at the level of commitment that I want to put.
No, that
Thank you
makes a
very
lot of
much.
sense.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, the alternative, if you have two topics which are very isolated, then you want to have two mailing lists.
Okay.
And the reason why you want to have that is because the solution that I told you works great for the individuals, but maybe makes it a little bit less likely that they share it. Why? Because if you have an email, for example, that is only for coding,
Mm-hmm.
if someone wants to share it in a coding community, they will share it as a no-brainer. Look, here is a newsletter on coding, subscribe. If your newsletter is on coding, novels, I don't know, skiing, and so
Yeah,
on,
for example. Mm-hmm.
maybe there is a
Mhm.
person that loves your newsletter because every time they see something that interests them. But when it comes to the moment for sharing, they will be less likely to share it because they're like, oh, you should follow Geoffrey, and he writes about coding, oh, also skiing, and also maybe
Yeah.
maybe
Mhm.
that's not relevant for this community, and they don't share. So that's kind of the trade-offs you want to make.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
at first, for example, if you're not sure you're gonna attract a lot of people, you just build a single mailing list, and then as it grows, you just figure things out.
Yeah, so if you think that you will figure things out, start tagging people early.
Okay.
Because tagging doesn't take much time. The basic level of tagging, like they sign up from here, I will tag them A, they sign up from here, I will tag them B. That takes not much time, and you will not be able to do it very easily later on.
Mhm.
So this thing, do
Yeah.
it immediately. And then everything
Okay.
else, I guess you can figure it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it makes sense too with
Sorry,
the
just one thing.
Yeah.
Use tags, do not use segments or whatever thing.
Just tags.
Always
Okay.
use tags. The reason is because that you will be able to reuse it, change it, port it to another thing, whatever, it will work. And if you use
Okay.
another system, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. And if it doesn't,
Okay.
you will be in a lot of pain.
Cool. Thank you so much, Luca.
oh, Jeffrey's about to
Like,
he's about to start a mailing list right after this call.
Yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that makes a lot of sense, and it feels like especially like segmenting your email list, like once you hit big scale, maybe it makes more sense, but like you said, unless you have a mailing list for fitness and a mailing list for coding, two very different things, then it makes more sense to just keep everything concentrated so you can get like the benefits of that scale.
yeah, but if you have exactly two, I will keep them separate. And then what you do is that in the welcome email or in the footer of each email, you always remind people that you have the second one.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have an email only for one, it will be more relevant, and that's probably better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The thing is that if you have 4 topics, it's really hard to manage for mailing lists. Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. Let's see. I think that's it for my questions. Unless you have any book recommendations you want to make, aside from your own, of course.
Well, my own would be definitely the first ones. But
yeah.
the other book that I really like this year is How Big Things Get Done by Ben Fleischberg.
How big
So
things get done.
First of all, Ben Fleischberg has been recommended a few times by Nassim Taleb, his papers. He's a guy that knows, let's say, Nassim Taleb things. So like he's aware of the tales and this and those things, and he basically talks about project management and basically how you can keep your projects from going over time and over budget. And the thing is, a lot of people might think, I don't need it, I'm not a project manager. Every one of you will be a project manager at some point of your life, even if it's just for your wedding or your house renovation. And
could you guys spell the book, please? Sorry.
How Big Things Get Done.
Okay.
Yeah. If you write,
okay, thank you.
If you write How Big Things Get Done, Luca DellAnna LinkedIn, you can read my review, my review of the book.
Yeah, from Ben Fleischberg.
Yes,
okay, I got it.
Yes,
Thank you.
Also absolutely follow the guy on Twitter.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a very good book, and it's one book that I think that like should be high school material for everyone.
Wow, that's a big recommendation. All right, I'll have to pick up a copy. Now,
just because it would really save so much time. Even if the only contribution to society is that it cuts 20% out of wedding costs and out of house renovation costs, that's an enormous gain. Yeah.
What is your recommendation for anyone that wants to start with your books? What's the first book of yours that you'd recommend people pick up?
Well, it's really about what interests you. Probably the best generic one in a way is ergodicity. If you're interested in management, it's going to be best practices for operational excellence or managing remote teams. And if you're interested in human behavior, it's probably going to be the control heuristic.
Or Life Under a Microscope, which I found really interesting.
That's called The World Through a Magnifying Glass.
Oh, The World Through a Magnifying Glass. Sorry, I didn't mean to just get that totally wrong.
That's interesting. I think it's a little bit more niche, but yeah, of course. Like, yeah. Also, that book, I only did one edition, so the grammar is not super good. And yeah, it's one of my earliest books, and yeah.
Oh, my brother has Asperger's and is so I saw when I read that, I saw a lot of him in it, which I thought was interesting. It helped kind of explain certain aspects of, having lived with him and how he views the world, which I found really interesting. That's great. That's amazing.
Yeah, I've read this book too, and I've learned a lot of things. Like, some people, they just see the world through a magnifying glass, and they can't see the big picture, and there are tools to help them just take the, how do you say this in English? Take the big picture. Do you say this, Jack?
See the big picture.
See the big pictures. Sorry,
exactly.
Thank you. Yeah, yes. It was very interesting, actually. Yeah, but it's difficult. There were an example like with dancing or something, Luca, if you remember.
Yes.
But I can't remember, and it was like, it was interesting because I was asking at some point whether I was into the autism spectrum or not. I wasn't diagnosed, but sometimes I've got reactions that make me ask myself questions. But it was an interesting book, actually. So yeah, I recommend it for people who are interested in autism.
Yeah, thank you. And when you said like, don't know if I'm on the spectrum, the interesting thing is that in the book I'm explaining like the spectrum is not just from normal to autistic, but the spectrum is all the way until the other side. And you have people which are almost, I would call them like anti-autistic, meaning that autism is a bias in which you have too much attention to detail. And then you have people which are like average. And then on the other side of the spectrum, and we never talk about it, you have people who don't pay attention to details.
Yeah.
And a lot of other. So we are all on the spectrum, and the spectrum goes much further. And normal people, like not normal, like average people are not at the end of the spectrum, it's just the middle of it. And then you have a whole range of spectrum of behaviors. Yeah.
I have to read this book again because I forgot about the other side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, fascinating. And I've known some people on that other side of the spectrum as well. You know, who are great, perhaps big picture thinkers, but are not like, I want to say bad at the details, but don't see the details a lot of times.
Exactly.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Oh, Luca. Well, this has been a hell of a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much
Also
for
for me. Can we do it anytime? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys, and thank you so much, Jack, for organizing this. I don't know whom the idea came from, but thank you guys. I've had a great time.